All right, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening. Looks like it's probably the three of you and the three of us here. My name is Herjot Sangha. I'm the finance director with the City of Gilroy. With me today I have Carl Bjarke. He's the interim public services director or public works director. And then also I have with me is Karina Baxa. She's the finance manager within the finance department. So I do have a set of slides, about 20 slides. We can run through a presentation. I can hit the high notes and then do a Q&A. But if you want to, since we only have about three of us here, if you have any specifics that you want me to answer, we can go ahead and do that Q&A first. So you kind of let me know what your take is. Presentation? All right. Awesome. So we'll go ahead and take it away. So the city of Gilroy owns and operates its own water and wastewater utilities. We have approximately 15,000 customers on both ends. And they are growing. So the city obviously is growing as new development comes in and such. So, for the years, it has continued to grow. And, we have operational expenses. Both the utilities are required to run operations, the day-to-day maintenance on those. In addition to that, we're also required to maintain the capital infrastructure. So all the utilities, the capital stuff that's underneath the ground, right? So your water lines, your water pipes, and such. And then unique for Gilroy and Morgan Hill is we jointly own a sewer treatment plant, which is actually based out here in Gilroy. So as the population has grown, we're required to kind of upsize the treatment plant, as well as all the infrastructure that's within the city. So our operational and our capital costs are increasing. Why are those increasing? Again, as I think all of us have felt, the inflationary cost increases in the recent years. The city is no exception to that. So we're seeing those on the day-to-day operations, when we buy supplies and services. As well as when we go out to build projects, it's costing us much more from a construction perspective as well. The other big thing for our utilities is electricity. Both our water utility has water pumps to pump water up to certain geographic areas. Same thing with our sewer utility as well. The biggest cost being at the treatment plant, right, to run the plant 24/7. And then on the water utility side, one of the bigger costs, which is almost over 30% of our operational costs, is our water. So the city of Gilroy actually pays Valley Water to pump water out of the ground. So we have seen Valley Water rate increases that they charge us for pumping the water out of the ground. Those rates have obviously been increasing over the years as well. So those are another significant increase in the operational cost. The next item I have on there is updated of master plan. So periodically the cities go through this master planning where they kind of study the existing infrastructure and its capacity, and then they kind of project out 5, 10, 20 years on what the system needs are going to be to support the population or the demand growth in both of the systems. The City of Gilroy in 2022 initiated that study, and we recently completed it, and the council reviewed it and adopted it in 2023 for both water and wastewater utilities. So both of the utilities that reviewed that survey determined there's a lot of work that we need to get done on the existing infrastructure to upsize some pipes or improve some older pipes that are in the ground. So existing deficiencies in that sense. So periodically, about every 5 years or so, cities go through this process called the rate study or rate setting process, where they essentially project out for the next 5 years the needs of the water and the wastewater utility and establish rates that are necessary to fund the ongoing operations, so the day-to-day stuff, any kind of capital improvement, any big improvements we need to do, as well as any kind of reserves that we establish that we're going to maintain some reserves just like you and I do for our households, we have rainy day reserves. The utilities also similarly have a reserve policy as well. So our last rate study was conducted in 2015, which set out the rates for 5 years from that period. So, the last increase from that rate study was in 2019. So 2019, fast forward to now, 2023, the rates for both utilities have remained unchanged. So, we're able to kind of maintain that. We had some cash on hand, but now we know that costs are continuing to soar. It warrants us to go ahead and conduct a study and kind of realize that we also need to kind of keep pace with the costs as well. So we engaged a consultant professionals to do this study last year. They have completed the study. We presented the study to council on August 21st. They accepted the report. And then what we're initiating is what was called the Prop 218 process. We're required to notice all the property owners, the customers that we're proposing to adjust the rates and such. So we have determined, the study has determined that we will need multi-year rates, which we will talk about specific to the utilities. So the objectives of the rate study really are to just ensure both our water and wastewater rates will be able to cover the operating, the maintenance, as well as our treatment costs, right? So our water plant treatment plant as well. It also ensures that we have enough funding to fund our capital projects. So if there's a certain area in Gilroy that has outdated older sewer lines, water lines, that perhaps are leaking or have some kind of seepage, so we want to make sure we get to those, address those, replace those as soon as possible. So we rates make sure that we fund that capital improvement program. We're also objecting to maintain the appropriate reserve funds in both water and wastewater utility. I'll talk about that in a little bit, what those are. Also, our sewer utility also has a existing bond that we issued to fund the expansion of the SCRA treatment plant. So we're required to maintain a certain level of debt coverage legally. So the rate study takes that into account as well to make sure that we're going to be able to make the mortgage on those bonds for the foreseeable future, if you will. And last but not least objective is to comply with the legal requirement of Prop 218 process. The methodology is essentially a three-step process. So the rate study takes into account the financial plans. It takes into account what we think the utilities, the current rates are going to generate, what we believe our current expenditures are going to be, and then we determine what the revenue that we need in order to maintain the utility. So it's also known as the net revenue requirement. Then we do a cost of service analysis, essentially which customers are consuming how much of that utility, and then how much of that revenue should be coming from, say, residential customers or commercial customers and such. So it's done for both utilities. And last but not least is the rate design analysis. Again, just considering the structure between, commercial rates, residential rates, if there's going to be high users within commercials like hospitals and such versus retail, office space, or schools, things of that nature. So that's the rate design process, if you will, is also looked at and then adjusted as part of the rate study. Talking specifically about results, so our water utility ranges. So basically our requirement to operate the water utility is about $16 million in the current fiscal year, and it's going to grow to about $19 million over the next several years. So as you can see, the expenditure is going to grow. Our requirement to raise the rates is also going to grow. We have a reserve policy, which contains of two components. One is operational reserve. So any given year, we set aside 6 months' worth of expenditures as a reserve in that given year, as well as a capital replacement reserve, which is our capital stuff for infrastructure improvements, which is established at 50% of the annual CIP over the 5-year period. So for the water utility, that amount is $4.1 million, plus the 6 months of operations operational reserve. So our annual target in the current year is to maintain $12 million in the bank as a rainy day fund on our water utility. And then the other part is, again, we're doing significant, as I told you, we did the master planning. We kind of assessed the infrastructure. That determined a lot of capital improvement. So we're going to be spending on average about $8 million to just improve our infrastructure that's under the ground on the water utility side. How are those funded? Again, we have some cash on hand. So we'll be spending some cash on hand as well as, combined with the rates that we will increase. So it's a fine balance that we do. So we'll be looking to, kind of utilize those. So it'll be a combination factor. From a cost of service and rate design, there is a slight change in the rate design for our water utility. The rate study or the analysis determined that approximately 40% of our fixed costs are fixed costs from an operation perspective, and then 60% are variable. So our current structure kind of has it in proportions of 30% fixed and 70% variable. So we are recommending to transition to more of a fixed by 10%, if you will, to collect 40% of our fixed costs from a rate design perspective. On the volumetric charge, currently we're charging two tiers. So if you are in a certain zone, you're paying for the first 30,000 gallons, you're paying one set of rate on a volumetric charge. And then anything above 30,000 gallons, you're paying a second set rate for those gallons that are utilized. We are recommending that we transition and just keep one tier, so it's simple for everyone to understand. And because we're drawing the groundwater that we're pumping from, essentially is all Valley Water's ground charge, and we're only buying water from one vendor, it makes sense for us to transition to a uniform tier. All in all, the end result, the rate adjustments are 8% for the first 2 years, so the current year as well as the next year, and then a 6% in the third year and a 4% and a 4% in the last 2 years. So it's a 5-year period, multi-year. First 2 years are 8, third is 6, and the latter 2 years are going to be 4% each. The first year's adjustments, well, again, I'll cover again. This is assuming that we are going to, everything gets approved in October. We will go ahead and institute the new rates in January 1 of 2024. This is again, a very detailed slide, but essentially demonstrates our expenditures that we're going to have a deficiency in our rate revenues. That's projected, and it also tells us that we're going to need anywhere from $500,000 up to $4.6 million of rate revenue over the next 5 years. So that's what this slide kind of intends, but I spoke to it earlier. This slide demonstrates our water reserves. So this essentially tells you, yes, the blue bar kind of represent how much cash we have on hand currently. So we have some cash on hand. We're going to be expending that cash over the next 2 years. So you'll see the blue bars drop down, and then our green line there is our minimum target reserve. So this chart essentially demonstrates over the 5-year period, we are going to maintain our minimum target reserves in our water utility while we spend down the cash that we have on hand to do some capital projects. This is a very important slide. This is the proposed rates, essentially. So you'll see the current rate structure, which varies by meter size for our residential customers as well as our commercial customers. And then on the bottom, you have the variable charges for all water consumed, again, over the 2 tiers. The third column is essentially the new proposed rates that will go into effect on January 1. So the column that states 2023-24 will be the new rate. So, for example, you have a 3/4-inch meter will go from $11.53 to $20.63 per month, and as high as the 4-inch meters will go from the current rate of $192.30 per month to the $217.70 per month. So depending on which class, what meter size you have at your property, that's what you're assessed. And this information is on your utility bill, so you should be able to see that as well. And on the bottom is where we have the tiered volumetric rate. Again, we're proposing to transition and keep only one tier. So whatever water you consume will be charged. Currently, it varies from $4.39 all the way up to $6.06. Under the new rate design, it will be a flat. Again, all customers will pay the same uniform tier. It'll be $4 for Tier 1 in Zone 1, all the way up to $4.73 in Zone 3, so depending on what zone you are in. Again, so these are uniform rates for the subsequent years. The percentages that I shared with you, the 8%, the 6%, the 4% is going to be applied to those rates to determine the subsequent years' increases. Any questions here? Okay. This slide demonstrates the water bill impact for a single-family resident. So currently, with an average monthly water use of 8,300 gallons, an average single-family resident is paying $55.68 currently a month. Under the new rates, it will go to $62.29 in the first year, and then subsequently increasing to up to $77.12 by the last year, so which is the fiscal year 2024. So totality, you will see over the 5 years from the $55.68 all the way up to $77.12 per month. For our commercial customers, with a 1-inch meter that have an annual monthly average water use of 32,000 gallons, they're currently paying $152 for their bill. Their bill is actually going to, in the first year, drop down to $148.80. That's just a function of transitioning the shift I talked about, how much we collect from residential versus commercial customers. So we have more residential customers in our community than the last time we did the study. And then after the first year, we'll go from the $148.80 per month all the way up to the $184.24 per month for our commercial customers. This chart demonstrates the regional comparison. So it compares our proposed water bill for the first year to other neighboring agencies. So again, as we talked about, we are towards the lower end within the comparator agencies. We have City of Hollister, Morgan Hills, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, Milpitas, Santa Cruz, and San Jose Municipal Water that we compare to. So we're towards the lower end. Under the proposed model, we'd be at the 73 and 43 cents per month when we compare to our regional comparators. All right, so that was the water utility and the water rates. Now I'm going to transition into the wastewater utility, and we'll talk about the wastewater rates. Similarly, the net revenue requirement for the wastewater utility, again, the money that we need to operate, goes from $13 million in our current fiscal year up to $17 million by the fifth year. So as you can see, our money that we need in order to operate the utility is growing. Obviously, it's going to require some rate adjustments as well. On the wastewater utility, we have a very similar reserve target, 6 months of operation, annual operation in a given year. And then, again, 50% of the average annual CIP. So combined for the current fiscal year, they're about $11 million. So that's what we maintain as a rainy day fund, if you will, from a reserves perspective. Rate design, unlike the water utility, we're not proposing any changes to the rate design. We're going to maintain the existing structure, existing classifications and categories. From a rate adjustment perspective, We don't need as much as significant rate increases, if you will, on the wastewater side or the sewer utility side. So those rate increases are going to be about 4% for the next 4 years, whereas water utility is the one that utility that requires a little bit of more higher rate increases, if you will. Again, similarly to the water revenue requirement, this chart demonstrates the wastewater revenue requirement. Essentially tells us that we're going to be basically rate revenue deficient starting fiscal year 25 all the way through 28 from about $300,000 to about $2.7 million. And then the amount of new rate revenue that we need to generate will be about $500,000 in the current fiscal year all the way up to $3 million in the last year. Again, our wastewater utility, as I mentioned, also has some debt. We have a mortgage on this, if you will, on this utility. We're required to pay the payments. So we are also legally required to maintain what's called a debt coverage ratio of 1.25. So it says essentially a surplus, if you will, in any given year to maintain for the annual debt service at 1.25. This chart demonstrates the reserve requirements. Again, the blue bars represent the cash balances, as well as the green line represents the minimum target reserves. So the chart demonstrates, yes, we have some cash on hand, but over the next 5 years, we're going to utilize that cash to fund a lot of our CIP. Therefore, the rate increases that we need on the sewer utility side are going to be, lesser than the ones that are necessary on the water side. The proposed wastewater rates, again, given what it essentially has is a monthly fixed charge for residentials, and our non-residential folks have a fixed charge as well as a volumetric charge. So residentials are charged a fixed flat rate each month. Commercials have a fixed flat rate as well as a volumetric charge that's dependent on how much water they use. So under our residential, our current rates for a single family are $46.64. They are proposed to increase to $51.07 in the first year. And then all the way down to the fifth year, they'll increase to $59.74. Again, on the commercial side or the non-residential side, depending on what type of a business you are, if you're a hospital, a restaurant, a hotel, you're classified in one of these strength categories: low, domestic, medium to high. So this, again, should be on your utility bill. You can determine that today. If you are a commercial customer, what strength is assigned to your business, as well as on the monthly fixed charge, you're also assigned to a significant, non-significant, or other category. That determines the amount that you pay as a fixed cost. So for those, as you can see, we're going to be increasing those for the first year. For the non-residential or commercial folks, and the low strength will range from $8.36 all the way up to $21.56 in the first year, and the subsequent years are going to be the 4% increases, if you will. Same thing on the monthly charges. The first year, the significant all the way down to other non-significant non-residential will be ranging from $15.47 all the way up to $287.19. And then again, 4% for the subsequent 4 years. This chart demonstrates or illustrates the wastewater bill impact for the single-family resident. So currently, again, as I indicated, we are paying $46.64, and that is going to be increasing to $51.07 come January. And then over the 4-year period, that 51 will grow by the 4% all the way up to the $59.74 by the fifth year. For our commercial customers, they're currently paying the $106.31 based on their 28,000 gallon per month consumption. and their bill will increase from the $106 all the way up to about $120 in the first year, and then over the course all the way by the fifth year, it will be $140.29 per month. Similar comparison to our neighbors, if you will. Here we're comparing San Jose, Watsonville, Gilroy, Santa Cruz, Morgan Hill, and Hollister. We find ourselves right in the middle again. We are proposing, again, currently $46.64 that we're paying. It will increase up to $51, which is just less shy for Morgan Hill and Santa Cruz, if you will. So that concludes my presentation on both the water and the wastewater rates and the process that we took to date on determining the rates and such. As far as our next steps go, we have started the Prop 218 process where we are required to notice all of our customers and our property owners, if you will. So you should have received something in the mail by now. And if you haven't, you will, again, receive a notice again as a utility customer as well. So your upcoming utility bill will have a very similar flyer providing you information on this. We have a website that's set up already, on our webpage on our website. Sorry, and then we're targeting October. Well, we are scheduled October 16th as the public hearing. As well as the date to submit any kind of written protest to challenge the rate settings, if you will, that we're proposing. So come October 16th, Council will conduct a public hearing. We will count any kind of protest ballots that we have received. And as long as we have not received 50% plus one, which is a majority protest, the council can further move on with the public hearing and consider adjusting the rates as they wish. So that's the process, and that's our next step date, if you will. If council moves forward to adopt the rates and the adjustments that we have proposed for both utilities, they will go into effect January 1, 2024. So the bill that you will get in February, which will have your January consumption, will have the new rates applied on the bills. So that, and then thereon, annually thereafter, we'll adjust the rates in a very similar fashion. So any consumption that January 1st moving forward for the next 4 years will increase based on the proposed rates that we have. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
So you said that you have some infrastructure going on, the project. Can you detail a little bit on that?
Yeah, so our biggest, so I'll start on the sewer side, wastewater side. So our biggest project currently underway is our sewer treatment expansion plan project, the plant expansion that's currently underway. I talked about, we borrowed money to fund that project. So that project is underway. It will be complete in the next 2 years, so by 2025. Aside from that, we talked about the master plan projects that both utilities conducted. So we have some sewer line improvements that we need to do. We have some water line improvements that we have to do. We have a certain region that still has older water meters, so we're updating some water meter infrastructure as well, and things of that nature. And then on the water utility side, our biggest significant project is going to be, we have water wells that store the water. We need to do some deferred maintenance and improvements on those water wells to make sure that they're up to par and they're able to hold the quality of water that the community expects and to the environmental standards.
You said the sewage plant was shared with Morgan Hill. What is that partnership financially?
So I believe it is 58-42 is the split. Gilroy is the largest share because we're a bigger population. And annually, from an operations perspective, they split based on how much flow comes from each cities and such. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, first, excuse my voice, get some problem with voice. I'll try to be as clear as possible. I took a look at your study, water study online. So I went through some of the numbers, get some questions. My first impression was that the rate increase, you mentioned it for the first few years, it's 8, and 6. But the number I looked at was the one that you put up for the average family. So if you can go back to that bar.
Sure. On the water side?
On the water side, right? So that was the single family residential. But if you use the number, because at that time I didn't understand your justification. So I look at the number itself, I see the first year when you make adjustment for the average family is about 12% increase. And second year is 8%. And then 8%, then 4%. Now I understand because you've frozen the rate since 19, so maybe that's a justification. But from the customer, the regular customer's point of view, when they look at numbers, just when I first look at it, I get a little bit shocked or puzzled. Say, whoa, that's a pretty huge increase, especially when you look at the current situation. And also, you use certain kind of assumptions about inflation in your study, and the average inflation you use for general inflation, the energy inflation, the water purchase inflation is about between 3 and 5. But then if you look at rate increase, if you look at them from the first year to the last year, maybe it's way outpaced that one. So that one you might need some kind of, not understand it because we've frozen the rate now we need some catch up, but probably for
capital.
Yeah, for
so
also
projects.
Capital, right? Also capital
Day-to-day operations that. So from the question presented was, why are the water rate increases in the first year higher than lower in the latter years, while the inflation assumptions in the rate study are ranging from 3 to 5 or 7%. Depending on what type of a category. And primarily, the reason twofold is, if we were to just fund our operations, we can probably maintain at the 3 to 4 to 5%. But because there's a component of capital projects and the timing and the delivery of those projects on, how those are set, that's what drives the other portion of the increases that we need. Now, if we had no capital projects, we were just doing our day-to-day operation and maintenance, I think we could justify that. But because we did the master plan study, we know we have work to do. We can tailor it whatever way we want because we haven't had rate increases for several years. So the first 2 years essentially kind of catch you up, and then we kind of pare back down into the standard inflation rate. Yeah.
The other question about I look at your forecast, the financial forecast, then look at your revenue and also your cost. Yeah, I see the revenue increase over the 5 years, but the first question is that the revenue increase, especially the user fee increase, I was thinking what be keeping pace with the rate increase, but turned out that to be lower than that one. So why is that?
So that's just a function of how they display the table. So let me see if I have sorry. Let me bring it back up. Do I have it? Okay. So you're talking about the user fee up top there. So this is just what our current forecast is, right? So if we were to not do anything, we would have a small increase. That's just as population grows. The bottom line there, it says additional revenue from rate required. So those two line items are really the essential key here. So this tells you, so that's your revenue. So this is what your surplus. So we're going to run a surplus. We're projecting about $2 million to $4 million, right? So over the next 5-year period. And then they calculate and add in how much with these proposed 88644, how much is that going to generate in the given year? The first year, because this is fiscal year 24, and we're not going to implement the rates until January 1, we can only capture half a year of the rate increases. So you'll see a very smaller increase in the first year, but the subsequent years. So if you were to add this line to the user fees, that should get you to your expenditures. Yeah, it's just how they demonstrate how much rate revenue we need.
Another, probably the last question, because I look at the first set of number, I also noticed that there's a significant increase in the costs. Right? Then I was compared the increase in the revenue and also the increase in the cost. It seems that the increase in the cost way outpaced the increase in revenue. And I also noticed that certain items, the increase percentage-wise is much larger than the general trend. So, yeah, for example, like I know you have the water administration, the billing, and also the water operation. In almost all of them, the wage salary increase are become the major item, major driver, and especially for the water operation. If you compare the revenue, the salary at the beginning and the end of fifth year, that increase percentage-wise is very big. And also the value water thing, that one I don't understand. That increase is even bigger. So those seem to be the major cost driver. Can you explain that a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so a couple things as part of, one is as part of the current adopted budget, Council authorized a restructuring of departments, and we have instituted a new utilities department, if you will. So the cost increases from a personnel perspective account. A portion of it is because we're going to be actually, breaking out and standing up a utilities department to do a lot of this work, like the CIP, because those studies that we talked about, again, the master plans told us that we have a lot of work we need to do. So we have added a few positions on both water and the wastewater side to ensure, we can focus and we can get, the work that we need to get done. And the second component is, as, again, we have seen inflationary pressures throughout the market, throughout the state, the nation, right, be it wages or procurement and such for materials, supplies, and services. So we are using an average, but for the last couple of years, it has skewed that percentage, right? So it's costing us a lot more to construct capital infrastructure projects as well. So, when we talk about either project escalation, inflation, we use a different set of index. When we talk about personnel, we use a different set of index. So that's why those percentages will vary in our forecast. Electricity is another good one. Utilities, although we say our general inflation is anywhere from 2.5% to 3%, utilities year over year, as you know, continue to exceed that, the national average or whatever the regional average is. They're more upwards of 5 to 7%, reality-wise. Valley Water, again, I think we talked about on our water utility because we pump the water from our ground. How much ever water we pump, we get charged by Valley Water. Similar to how we set the rates, they do the same process of rate setting, Prop 218 process as well, right? So they go through this process. They have their personnel, their capital projects that they need to deliver that provide services to the groundwater facilities here. So as they raise their rates that they are charging us, we forecast those out as well. They're doing similar to us. They're doing a lot of capital stuff as well in the region.
So the value related to your water purchase was different. The Valley Water.
Valley Water is the direct water purchase. Yes. Mm-hmm.
But the water purchase assumptions
5%. Yes, 5%.
That increase in Valley Water is way bigger than.
It shouldn't be. Yeah, we could. It wouldn't. Yeah. Sure. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay. Yeah. So this one is. So the assumption the first year or so is actually because we were in a drought, we were under a mandate to conserve water. So we are projecting we are going to, because we're no longer under a declared drought, we are projecting it's a combination of increase in the actual consumption, so the more water we're projecting we're going to pump out, as well as the increase in the charge that Valley Water is going to charge us. So it's actually two factors in the first year. So, but the subsequent years, starting 25, 26 onwards, you should see it'll be the 5%. Yeah. Yes, because we're no longer under mandated, conservation at the state level as well. We're forecasting, at least in the first year, in this first year, we will expect consumption to return. To what level? Will it return to, pre-drought levels? We don't know. So we have some assumption that will happen. So we bake it into the expenditure side, and then the rate revenue requirement is a calculation function, so that will determine how much we need over the 5-year period, not specifically in a given year, right? Yeah. I really appreciate you going through the rate study. That it gives me joy, sort of, because that's exactly what I had to sit, and that's the process that we go through as professionals as well. Once we provide all the data to the consultants, they provide all this back, and we basically comb through it and verify that we're good with those assumptions. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, if none, then that will conclude tonight's committee meeting. Again, thank you for taking the time to come out and spend some time with us and learn a bit about the rate study. If you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out to me. My name is Herjot Sangha. I probably have some business cards here I can give you, or again, log on to our website, finance webpage, and there's a dedicated webpage just for the water and wastewater rate study. We want to go ahead and make sure we answer any questions that you may have. All right. Thank you.